Good afternoon. I'm coming to you with another author chat. Happy Friday to all of you. And I had the pleasure of reading her first book, fabulous historical fiction, a couple of years ago with the Book Friends Book Club. And it was so wonderful. We had a great chat with her. I'm still getting used to this StreamYard software, so bear with me. There's her first book. I just loved it. All We Were Promised. Isn't that a fabulous cover? It's just engrossing historical fiction set in Philadelphia in the period between the Revolutionary War and the Civil War. And it's a fascinating story. We learned so much about history. We had a lovely chat with her with the Book Friends Book Club, so that when I found that she had a new book coming out, and her new one has just been released, and I have that one on my Kindle, and it's called Runner. Now look at that. There's another stunning cover. Look at the beautiful colors that they used. It's about Prohibition era folks living on Martha's Vineyard and rum running. Doesn't that sound fascinating? It's full of all sorts of adventure, family drama, all sorts of complications. And it's so impeccably researched, as was her first book. She just does a beautiful job with getting all of the information together and then coming up with these fascinating fictional characters and telling a whole story about them. Some of her characters are based on real folks, and I'm going to talk with her about that. Some of her characters are purely from her imagination, and some of their drama in their life, of course, is from her imagination, but not all of it. This is a fascinating era of history that I really didn't know much about. I've not been to Martha's Vineyard, so I've not had the pleasure of going to the museums and things that are on the island that she writes about in her author's note. And I just haven't had the pleasure of spending time there, but she has. And it's a fascinating area of the country that I really want to go to now that I've read more about it and learned a little bit about the fascinating history. Actually, it was an area that was quite diverse. Hi there.
Jeannie, how are you?
I'm sorry for that little technical hiccup. I thought I had it all figured out.
No problem.
And it worked so good the other day, and then whoop. You know how it is. Happy Friday.
Thank you. Yeah, you too. Happy to be
Nice
able
to see you again.
Yeah, it's good to be back in touch.
We had such a nice chat with our book club a couple of years ago, and I was holding up your book covers and introducing you, telling folks about your wonderful, wonderful historical fiction. I loved this book so much, I can't even tell you how many people I've recommended it to.
Oh, thank you. I love that.
And I love the cover. I love the characters. I learned so much about Philadelphia, things that, there's just so much we never learned in history class, right?
Yes.
And then this one, which I just finished reading yesterday. There it is. Now you can really see it. This cover is so stunning.
I love it. The more because I just got my finished copies like a week and a half ago, and I'm getting to see the purple like in person, and it's oh my gosh, it's spectacular. It's spectacular.
It's just gorgeous. I'm assuming that you had something to do with selecting your covers and approving them and everything.
Yes, just selecting and approving them. All credit goes to the artists and the cover designers. I'm, not like a visual person, but I'm just happy to be here with them, I think.
I have no artistic talent, and I proudly admit that. It just doesn't exist. So, Ashton, let's talk a little bit about your background and have people get to know you, because the whole point is to get people to find out about you, find out about your wonderful books, and go buy them, right?
Yeah.
Let's sell some books. So tell us a little bit about where you grew up, and I'll tell you what people always want to know is they always want to know, were authors readers as children?
Oh, big reader as a child. Yes. Yeah. And I was an only child, so it was really just me and my books. And eventually I started writing stories as well. So big reader and also always a writer. But I grew up in central New Jersey, very near like Rutgers University, that area. And yeah, I lived there until I went off to college. So Jersey girl.
Did you have a big family?
Just me and my parents, and lots of cousins and aunts and uncles who were like around in the next town over and in town. But so yeah, a big extended family, but just me and my parents in the house.
And were your parents big readers? So did they get you started with the library card and all that kind of stuff?
All that kind of stuff. And then I started
Yeah.
borrowing my mom's books. My dad was more of like a big history buff, so he read a lot of nonfiction. He had all the like Civil War books and World War II stuff. And me and my
Mhm.
mom more read like on the fiction side. But I think you can kind of tell from the way I ended up writing my stories that I think I kind of pull a little bit from each of them.
Yeah, because you got a little bit of everything in there, and especially in Runner. Boy, you
Yes.
packed a lot into that book. We'll talk about it in a moment. No spoilers for those watching because the book just came out.
Mhm.
So
Yeah.
no spoilers, but we want to entice readers, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Because it's so good. I just couldn't put it down.
Well, thank you.
So what kind of stuff did you read as a kid?
I read like science fiction. I read fantasy. Like A Wrinkle in Time was my favorite book as a kid.
Mm.
So I was kind of in that space. And as I got older, I started kind of getting into, I guess you could call it history. I read a lot of Anne Rice. That's what I remember reading, like from my early teens, kind of on upward. And then once I was maybe like in college or so, is when I started getting into more like contemporary historical fiction.
Mhm.
I was really big into the Philippa Gregory books, like The Other Boleyn Girl and the whole Tudor series. When all that was kind of going on and getting started, I was obsessed with those. So yeah, I read pretty widely, I would say.
Yeah, sounds like it.
Yeah.
And you said you were writing from a very young age. Were you making up stories and
I was making up stories, I think from like age 10 onward, pretty much like right when we got a computer and there was a
uh-huh.
word processor and I could just kind of go in there and go to town and then print it
Yep.
out. It was very exciting because you had a printer. So yeah, I was writing stories very, very early on. And I think they were kind of in that similar, almost like the Portal kind of fantasy genre. That's like the earliest thing I remember writing, and some contemporary, like, school drama kind of stuff as well.
Yeah.
And so I did, like, that was my first foray into kind of creative writing. And once I got to high school, I shifted over into poetry and then journalism when I got to college. But yeah, there's always been some kind of writing kind of going on, whatever else was happening with my life, for sure.
Now, did you study journalism in college?
Oh, well, I guess no. I was getting ready to say yes because it took up so much of my time. I was on the, the school newspaper.
Yeah, I did
So
that too.
yeah. So it feels like I majored in journalism, but they actually don't have a journalism major there. So
Oh,
I was an English major.
okay.
So very, very adjacent. But yeah, I did lots of journalism, but I was an English major.
So I have to ask, how did you end up being a lawyer?
I got roped in the same way a lot of writers get roped in, which is, oh, you like reading and writing and research, and that's really all the law is. So
Mhm.
you should go do that and have like a nice, stable career. Stability was very attractive at the time. I
Sure.
graduated in 2008, so Great Recession, like the
Oh,
economy has crashed. Journalism is like on fire. It was bad. It was pretty
yeah.
bad. So, somebody kind of dangling something in front of me where it's like, oh, you can read and write all day and you can do interesting research and, you'll have kind of a stable career path, sounded really attractive. And I enjoyed law school quite a lot. I found it just like a really useful way to understand the world, just learning kind of the structures that make the country work and make our society work. And I still kind of carry that with me to a large extent, I would say. So yeah, that's kind of how I got into it, just looking for something that felt like it was sort of in line with what I was interested in and what I was good at, and maybe was a little bit more attainable or responsible feeling than being a journalist or writing books for a living, God forbid.
So what law school did you go to?
I went to Harvard Law.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Because I'm a retired lawyer,
Yes. Yeah. What
but
law
I
school?
did not go to Harvard.
Okay. Yeah.
I went to McGeorge, which is a very well-respected school here in California.
Mhm.
Our biggest claim to fame is Anthony Kennedy, of course, was one of our professors.
Oh, that's a really good claim to fame. We have some
Yeah.
people who are terrifying who are claim to fame, from my law school. I don't want to claim them at all. So yeah, I
Yeah.
think you're all to the good there.
You have a lot more Supreme Court justices, and obviously Harvard carries a lot more weight. But McGeorge is, it's a well-recognized school, particularly within California, since it's in Sacramento, and
Mm,
it's the seat of state government. And so there's a lot of us like me who end up going into, public sector, and
Oh,
I worked
yeah.
for the state for, 21 years.
Nice.
But yeah, so I did the night program. So that was a little different too, because I was already married and had one kid, and then I had two by the time I finished. I don't recommend that.
Oh my gosh, how did you survive? That's crazy.
I don't know. I look back on it now. I go, I don't know. We just put one foot in front of the other, right? That's all you do.
Oh, yeah.
Waddle around campus pregnant.
Oh my gosh. Oh,
I really don't recommend that.
One of my classmates was pregnant, but it was 3L year. So it was okay, because by that point, it's not that serious of an endeavor anymore. You're kind of through it and everything, but still it's tough to imagine how she kind of got through it. I always admired her so much for doing all of that at the same time.
Yeah. Well, I was married, and, I had two living parents at the time, and although my father died right after he was born, but, my mother and my mother-in-law were alive. They could help. And, my husband was really good about, I got to go to class. I got it, so, I mean, somehow you make it, right?
Yeah.
Things get put in your path, and we wouldn't trade them for anything, but, certainly didn't do that deliberately.
No.
No. So anyway, so you practice law, but you left it.
Mm-hmm.
So now you're into journalism. Tell us about your journalistic efforts these days, because they sound fascinating.
Yeah. So right now I am the executive editor at the Preamble, which is Sharon McMahon's Substack, and it focuses on politics, history, government, civics, which is kind of all the stuff that I find interesting, and that, kind of in law school so interesting for me. So it's a really interesting space to be in right now. So we've been, just covering, I mean, there's always a ton going on, in terms of what's happening in the government and, with Congress and the presidency, the Supreme Court, all of it. So I'm just constantly kind of, trying to stay on top of the fire hose of news coming out of this administration and everything else. So that's the space I'm in at the moment. And I'm still on the board of Prism, which is a nonprofit news outlet. That focuses on social justice. And I think that's where I was when we spoke before. I was just maybe stepping away from being the editor-in-chief there. But yeah, I'm still on the board, so still involved with that as well. So yeah, I've got my hands in a couple of different journalistic spaces, but it really covers all of my different kinds of spheres of interest. So yeah.
So how do you find time to write books then? Because I know you have a family. Lots of responsibilities. So are you one of these set the alarm for 3:30 and get up and write till 6, or?
Oh, no, I am one of those set an extremely low bar for every day, and then it's very easy to clear. So my bar when I'm drafting is you have to do 1 10-minute writing sprint every day. If I'm really going crazy, it might be you have to do 2 10-minute writing sprints or 3. And the reason for that is that there is no day when you're not going to be able to find 10 minutes to stop scrolling or stop watching whatever you're watching, stop arguing with people online, just take a few minutes away from the kids or whatever and just sit down and draft. So that tends to be how I get a draft out, and it just accumulates. It just accumulates over time. I always write forward. I don't go back and edit until I have a full draft of a book. I'm not going to go back and change anything. So if I change my mind about how something went, I just write forward as if I had already gone back and edited it. And I think that forward momentum is what makes it possible for me to kind of fit it in around everything else. Now, I will say, I guess that's how I wrote most of All We Were Promised, and that's how I'm writing the book I'm working on now. But for Runner, I had taken a break from journalism for a while. So Runner, I actually just wrote full time. So yeah, let me not lie to the people. So for that one, I did have large chunks of time during the day to dedicate to writing and research. But yes, when I'm balancing, the kids and a day job and everything else, it's those 10-minute sprints for sure.
Wow, that's discipline.
Yes. Yeah.
You have to sit down every day and write. That's discipline.
Yeah.
Now, for this book, and of course the other one as well, you did a lot of research.
Yes.
So do you do your research all in advance and then start writing, or are you kind of still researching as you sit down to begin your first draft?
I tend to take it in phases. So what I like to do is to do enough research up front that I kind of understand the story world that people are in, that I understand their social context, the legal context, what kind of constraints there would have been on their behavior or where they might have lived. Basically enough research that I understand the world that they're operating in and how they can move through it. And then I have to stop and really build the story from there. And what I do is come back later and fill in some of the more kind of textural details, like how many buttons would a sleeve have on a dress in the
Yeah.
19th century, of a woman of this social class? What would they have been eating? What might the architecture of the house look like? The things that are important, sort of sensory details, I will say, or even like cultural things. What movies would they have been watching, or what would they have been listening to? The things that aren't necessarily going to make or break the story, but will bring a lot of authenticity to it, I tend to save for later, only because it's very easy to kind of get down a rabbit hole if you stop every time you need to look up like a little fact. But for something like All We Were Promised, I had to know before I started writing the story what happens when a slave owner brings their slaves to Philadelphia. Like the story is built around that kind of information. So those kind of structures, or like with Runner, how did Prohibition work, and where was the international water line? Was it 3 miles out? Was it 11 miles out? How far did the boats need to go before they were able to go pick up the liquor on their rum run? So those kind of like the bones of the world are done in advance, and I kind of leave the rest for later.
So do you know the beginning and the ending of your story? Are you a plotter, or do you pants it along the way a bit?
I believe I'm what people call a plantser, actually. So I I outline really heavily up front, and I will outline the whole story, and then I will get into like writing actual scenes, and then I just kind of let whatever happens happen. And I often discover things about the characters that I wasn't expecting, or they do things that were not what I had intended for them to do on the outline, and I often will just kind of go with it. Runner was interesting because, as you know, you just finished it. There's a bit of a mystery in there about who's responsible for the shipwreck. I wrote the whole thing not knowing the answer.
Did you really?
Got to the end. Yes.
I can't believe that, because the whole way I'm like, what happened? What happened? What happened? And I'm waiting to tell me, and then it's like,
yeah.
wow.
And I went through. There's a file with multiple like alternate endings for who did it.
Really?
So if anyone did it, because maybe it was an accident. No spoilers here. But yeah, that was one where I kind of had to discover over kind of an iterative process what the answer to the big question was. Now, I will say, like, some pieces of the ending, like where the main character ends up, mentally, emotionally in their journey, like I had a sense of that from the beginning. I know it's the same with All We Were Promised, but yeah, some of the more kind of intricate like story questions, some of those, yeah, I do discover over the course of the writing process, which is fun for me. So hopefully it's fun for the reader as well.
Yeah, I've heard so many authors say, I was just typing away and this character showed up.
Yep. Yeah.
I can't even imagine how that works, but it sounds fascinating.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's talk about your books a little bit. Now, I want to talk about this one a bit first, and then we'll get to Runner, but I still want people to go back and read this one.
Yes, yeah, we read them both. Buy them both. Buy many copies of them.
I got this one on Amazon. I think it was 50% off or something. I got a good deal on it. I just loved it. Now, I learned so much about this. There's so much we didn't learn in history class, Yeah. I did not know about the big event in this book in history class that took place in Philadelphia. I mean, clearly we learned that slavery existed in the United States, and we had the Civil War, right? But we didn't learn all the intricacies and these laws that they had about escaped. I mean, we knew there were people running around looking for escaped slaves and all of that, but we didn't know that there was sort of a, what's the word I want to use? Kind of an asylum up there in Pennsylvania that allowed folks to go up there and establish lives and be free. Tell folks a little bit about what this book is about, because it's just so fascinating.
Sure. So All We Were Promised is set in pre-Civil War Philadelphia. So it's the 1830s. So the Civil
Right.
War is still close to 3 decades away at this point. But the United States is clearly in a great deal of turmoil about this issue. And Philadelphia is this city that I think, for a lot of reasons, we understand as a beacon of freedom and independence and, the American story, the American spirit. But
Right.
it's also a place where there are legal structures in place that allow slavery to continue even after it has been abolished gradually in Pennsylvania. So this tells the story of three young women. So there is one who is from Philadelphia's Black elite. She was born free. Her parents were born free. So a very different kind of lens on the antebellum Black experience than I think that we usually get.
Right.
And her story is really based in reality. There really was this elite group of Black middle class and upper class Philadelphians who were free and involved in the abolitionist movement during this period. And she becomes friends with this young woman who has come to the city with a bit of a secret. And her secret is that she was formerly enslaved and she ran away. And she lives with her father now. And her father is passing for white. And she's basically posing as his domestic. And the third young woman is currently enslaved. She has been brought to the city by the plantation mistress who used to own both her and one of the other girls. And the story is about how they come together to get her free in Philadelphia. And it leads up to a big true event that happened in Philadelphia history within the abolitionist movement, which I won't spoil, but I will just say Philadelphia, as much as it was a site for freedom and free Black life, there were a lot of people who were really very strongly opposed to that and very much in favor of slavery and doing business with slave owners. And they were not really into all of the abolition stuff. So that caused some really violent conflicts over the course of those decades, the
Right.
1830s, the 1840s. And some of those conflicts show up in the story.
Right. And they culminate in a very, well, it's a historical event.
Yeah.
Apparently was something I just never heard about. And it's
Me
quite
too.
tragic, very
Yeah,
tragic,
extremely.
and has a lot of symbolism now,
Mm.
in the community, as I understand it from reading your book and your notes, for folks who are aware of it and what it meant at the
Yeah.
time and what it still represents, right?
Mhm, mhm. Yeah, it was, it's one of those events that tells you a great deal about the time in which it happened, and the
Yes.
place in which it happened, but it also feels a bit like something that could happen today.
Yes.
Sort of politics of backlash and mobs and riots, and really violent political disagreement, and, what that looks like when you're standing in the middle of it, and you're trying to push for social justice or do activism, and there are people who are just very deeply invested in the status quo, and pushing back against what looks like dangerous social change to them. So yeah, I think it did probably resonate quite a lot, with many people who are kind of pushing for some of the same ideas in this modern moment.
Oh, absolutely. And the idea of these three women coming together and the
Mm.
empowerment and the
Yes.
sisterhood that is in there. That's both of your books, that female empowerment,
Mm.
finding yourself, finding your power, your purpose, having your, girlfriends or your sisters
Mhm.
with you. I mean, that's a theme that runs through both books and beautifully, I have to say.
Thank you. Yeah.
I loved it. Tell folks just really quickly about this law that existed because I had never heard it till I read this book about this sojourner law. I had no idea that had gone on.
Yeah, me neither. I learned so much while I was researching for this book. But the Sojourner Law in Philadelphia, it was in Pennsylvania as a whole, was this law that basically said for people who were residents of southern states who owned slaves at the time, they were free to come into Pennsylvania and bring their enslaved people with them. And as long as they did not stay for more than 6 months, they would remain enslaved. So what was happening in these cases were that slave owners would bring their slaves with them into Pennsylvania, and then around the 5.5 mark say, oh, I need you to run out to New Jersey in order to get me, I don't know, a rake or go deliver, you know, a message to my friend. I need to send you back to Virginia because I forgot my dress, something, some reason to send them outside of Pennsylvania state lines, which basically reset the clock on whether or not they would become free. They're often doing this without the enslaved people knowing. Eventually, you know, they figured it out and were able to kind of work around it. But this was something that was really like widely done enough that they actually created an amendment to the Sojourner Law that said, stop doing that. That's an abuse of what this law is for. You're not supposed to do it. And people kept doing it anyway. Some of the people who did it were fairly prominent. One of them was George Washington, when he was president, keeping slaves in, in the president's house and sending them back to Virginia or sending them over to New Jersey when it was almost time for them to become free. So this was a really widely used loophole that was keeping people enslaved in Pennsylvania decades after the passage of the gradual emancipation law in Pennsylvania, which was actually passed in 1780. So, yeah.
Just another layer of cruelty, you know, because when I was reading the book, I remember putting myself in the position of somebody who thought, okay, if they know about the law, they've been brought there and they're counting the days, right?
Yeah.
And they're seeing their free, and then, wow, taken away from them.
Yeah. It wasn't.
I mean, the whole thing is horrible, but I mean, that's just one more thing, right?
Yeah. And especially in Philadelphia, because they really were seeing what freedom would look like because they're free Black people just freely wandering the streets, you know, in beautiful homes and beautiful lives. And and
you had a lot of wealthy businessmen, entrepreneurs, you know, folks that were living, you know, happy, free lives, and they could see that and aspire to it. I mean, it's just heartbreaking to think of. Tell folks I love your author's note because I'm a musician. What was the inspiration for that book? It's such a great story.
So the inspiration for All We Were Promised is simply that I am a Broadway geek, and one of my favorite Broadway shows. Yes, the first one I actually saw, the first Broadway show I saw was actually Les Mis, and I've seen it multiple times. And just, you know, in my regular spare time, I listen to, you know, the cast recording. My personal preference is the original London cast. I know people have very strong feelings about, you know, original Broadway or whatever it is. I am an original London cast girly, and I was listening to the cast recording in 2018, which at the time I was still practicing. I had just finished practicing law, and I was working at a job at University of Pennsylvania Law School. So I was in Philadelphia. And I was listening to one of the songs from the soundtrack, which is Who Am I?, which is when Jean Valjean is on the verge of being discovered. And he sings this line about this case of mistaken identity where there's another man who's been mistaken for him. And he's trying to decide whether or not he wants to tell the truth or let this man go to jail in his place, because he's basically been living as somebody else. And he says, you know, do I condemn this man to slavery? And I hear that. And I don't know where this thought came from or why this was in me to think, but I was like, you know, wouldn't it be fascinating if Les Mis was set in the United States and he did actually literally mean slavery? And instead of being a man who is in France during this rebellion, he is a white passing Black man who is living this kind of double life of stolen identity. And like, what an interesting story that would be. And the idea just kind of popped into my head, fully formed, based on this song. And so that's kind of the direction that I initially started writing, where the story was really centered on this man and his daughter, who was basically a Cosette figure, who he is very overprotective of, partially because he doesn't want to be discovered. And as I was writing, Cosette, who became Charlotte, it took over the story. And her girlfriends who were with her, it really just became about the three of them, and he kind of receded into the background a bit. But the bones of Les Mis are still very much in the story, with the character names, several of the character names actually, and even, you know, some of the plot structure is still in there. So that was the inspiration.
I love it. Brilliant. So brilliant. That was the first novel you published.
Yes.
Was that the first novel you'd actually written?
Yes. Mhm.
Oh,
Yeah.
wow. So tell us about the journey to publication. Were you quick to find an agent, and how did it all fall into place for you?
Yeah, so it was a process. I started writing in 2018 and I was writing. It took about 3 years before I had a full draft. And then I joined this workshop program through this wonderful nonprofit called We Need Diverse Books. And it was a revision
Oh,
workshop, which basically taught me and a cohort of other Black writers just how to revise a novel. And at the end of that, I had a revised manuscript and I was ready to query. And
I
so
see.
I jumped out there and I had an agent within 6 weeks, which I felt very fortunate because
Wow.
yeah, I heard the stories of how long the process could be. So
Yeah.
yeah, I was grateful that it moved very quickly for me. And I went on several, I did a couple rounds of revision with my agent once she kind of gave me her notes on the story. And then we went on submission and there was an auction and I had a publisher about 10 days later. So I had kind of the unicorn process. So I know that's not how it goes for everyone. And it may never go like that for me again, for all I know. But my first time out of the gate was really amazing. So yeah.
Wow, that's wonderful. Well, see, it was meant to be.
Hmm.
That story was meant to be in the hands of readers
Yes.
who wanted to learn something, and they did, like me.
Yes.
So
Absolutely.
fabulous. Everybody go out and get it. It's a wonderful book. Now, let's talk about the new one.
Yes.
This is so much fun. First of all, tell us the inspiration for this one, because it's just as interesting, I think.
Yeah. The inspiration for this one was a trip to Martha's Vineyard. I guess it was in 2014. So I had this idea before I had the idea for All We Were Promised, but I didn't actually sit down and write this until much, much later. So I was just visiting Martha's Vineyard on a long weekend with my best friend and her boyfriend and my husband. And we were at the museum, the Martha's Vineyard Museum, because anytime you take a trip with me, I am going to drag you to the nearest historical museum. That's just how it's going to go. And everybody's kind of
Sure.
accepting it. And I saw an exhibit there about Prohibition on Martha's Vineyard and learned that it was a major launch point for rum runners. The Vineyard, Nantucket, and the other kind of islands in that area, because they were close to the international waterline where the Coast Guard and the US and the police could no longer enforce the 18th Amendment and the Volstead Act. So basically, what was happening was there was a line of ships from Canada down to like the Bahamas that would come park out there just over the international waterline, and the rum runners would then go out to them and buy liquor and then run it back to shore under cover of darkness. And the exhibit that sparked the idea for this one was about a rum run gone horribly wrong. The shipwreck of the John Dwight in 1923, where the Coast Guard, come out to Vineyard Sound one morning and discover this ship that is wrecked. There are barrels of ale that are floating in the wreckage, and then just bodies of the crew floating in their life jackets, and everybody in the crew is dead. They all have these injuries that make it look like there was a fight. The captains are gone. The lifeboats are gone. And this was a big enough kind of mystery that it actually made the New York Times, that they were writing about it, within a couple of weeks, and they followed the story for a while. And we don't know what happened to the crew of the John Dwight. Was it a hijacking? Did the captains decide to rip off their crew? Did the boat hit something and sink? And maybe the crew members were injured by things on the ship. We have no idea. But it left me with enough kind of questions that it just kind of just rolled around in my head for a while. And there was a connection just because of the Black history of the Vineyard. Knowing how long-standing that Black history is, how long there have been both year-round and seasonal Black visitors, and how many of them were in the maritime trades. They were fishermen, they were whalers, they were cargo shippers. They were basically doing all of the same things, as anybody else on sort of an island would be doing. And we know from the history of Prohibition on the Vineyard that the people who were in the maritime trades were the ones who tended to become rum runners because they had boats already. So it was very easy for them to say, oh, okay, well, I'm going to get more for this bottle of rum that I'm going to get for however many pounds of fish. So I'm just going to go over here and I'm going to do this for a couple of years and see how it goes. So I just kind of put those two things together. And that is how we ended up with this story, which basically begins with my interpretation of that shipwreck, and what would the fallout look like for the family of the men who disappeared in that shipwreck.
And again, I had no idea about the vibrant Black community that was on Martha's Vineyard 100 years ago. I never heard about that either. And so that was fascinating to hear about. And there were a number of folks there that, again, were businessmen, entrepreneurs, business people, I should say. You have one character in the book who's a pharmacist.
Yes. Yeah.
Who runs his own pharmacy, who's very upstanding, very lovely gentleman. He plays figure very prominently in the story. But then you have this other family conflict. Now, I don't know how much we could say.
How much can we say? We will say
we don't want to ruin it, but it's really fascinating.
But it is. And we can say that we know that this starts with a shipwreck and the loss of the father figure of this family. We can say that while he was a criminal, that was not the worst thing about him. And he was flawed in a number of perhaps more deeply personal ways that his family learns about after his death, I think is as much
let's just say fishermen go away and they don't always come home that night.
No, they do not. No, they do not. They do not always come home that night, that week, that day. And who knows what they are getting up to while they are away from home.
Well, I don't know if you ever read, there's a wonderful book called Daughters of Nantucket. Have you ever read that one? It's
No.
Julie Gerstenblatt. And, she talks about the women that are, the husbands are off on the whaling ships and they're gone for months and months. And the wives are like, yeah, bye. And then they come home and they're like, oh, you're here.
Yep.
Don't bother us. We got our routine. We're taking care of our kids. We're doing our thing. And Lord knows what they've been up to while they've been gone,
Yeah. And there's some of that in this book too, because I think the women in the family, even before he is dead, have their own kind of rhythms when he's not around. And that's something that they carry with them from prior generations who, maybe their father, wasn't a fisherman. Maybe he was a whaler, like, you were saying in the book, Daughters of Nantucket, and would be gone for months at a time, sometimes like a year at a time. And the women kind of develop their own lives and ways of being and ways of taking care of themselves when the men aren't around. So a lot of that, I think, does kind of show up in this story.
Well, and they were able to be a lot more independent than women who had a husband that was there every day, telling them what to do, maybe making decisions. I mean, let's go back 100 years. I mean, not everybody was a feminist at this point, right?
No.
So So there were probably a lot of women who enjoyed having that freedom that, I get to decide what I'm going to do today and how I'm going to run the house and all the rest of it,
Exactly.
Might have been kind of liberating. So you build a family for Earl. I had to laugh when I'd be reading this book. I kept hearing the chicks in my head. That's all I'm going to say. You know the song. Anyway, and he has a wife. And he has 3 children.
Yes.
But the middle child, he has Walt.
Walt.
4, sorry.
4, and the twins and Lena.
That's right. I forgot there was 2 younger ones. It's a boy and a girl. So there's 4. And Lena's the one in the middle.
Yes.
And she's the one who has big plans that get derailed.
Yes. She's hoping to go off to college and she's finally able to do it. She's a little older than you would be for a normal college student. She's 23 years old. Now that her family finally has money from her father doing all this rum running, she's saying, okay, my family's stable. They're well taken care of. I can go off and kind of live the life I want to live now off of this island. Because she's a year-round island resident. She doesn't romanticize the vineyard the way that somebody who just comes for the summers might look at it as this special safe haven. She is stifled by it. It's a small town. It's a lot of things. It's a beautiful place, but Oak Bluffs it's a small town. And she lives there her whole life. And she's like, get me out of here. And then her father dies. And all of her plans seem to die with him, because if his operation is gone, then so is the income that would have made it possible for her to go to college. So she has a plan. She is going to take over the business, and she's going to, pay the taxes on the house so the family doesn't lose the house, pay the mortgage, make sure it's all taken care of. And then she's going to take the rest of her money and go to college and live the life that she's always dreamed of. And it's all going to go great, and it's going to be seamless, and nothing bad is going to happen. And that is not how it unfolds at all. So
No, not at all. Now, you also have a couple of other story points here that could be very contemporary as well. You have an older brother who fought in the war.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
And that's Walt.
Yes, Walt.
Who was very, very impacted by his experiences as a soldier.
Yes.
So they're trying to deal with that. And of course, nobody knows what PTSD is in these days.
No. So he just, he manages it in the way, I think that, he self-medicates with alcohol. But I think, he was deeply affected by it and never really been the same since he came back. And I think the women in his life kind of don't know what to do with that. And neither does he. So, yeah.
Nobody really, in those days, I guess nobody really knew.
No.
They just try to tell people, buck up and.
Yeah, buck up, shake it off. Yeah.
Now we're so much smarter about it, but it's, that was an interesting angle. And then you have this fascinating character, Dee, who ends up meeting Lena. She comes from a wealthy family, has had a very different experience growing up. And she's a musician, a piano player, like moi, which, so I found her fascinating because she wants to go off and play in jazz clubs. And you have LGBTQ plus representation in this book, which in 1923, again, very interesting. Tell folks about that.
Yeah. So Dee is, she's as you say, from a wealthy Black family in Boston, which is, and always kind of has been, a somewhat conservative city. Even for the times, Boston and New York are very different places. And the way that even sort of Black respectability works in those places is very different. And she is a queer character. And part of the reason that she is so determined to, she ends up joining Lena on this whirlwind, I guess, crime spree, for lack of a better term, because she is looking basically to leave Boston and go move down to New York. And she wants to move to New York for a couple of reasons. She's a pianist. She wants to play jazz piano. What better place is there for her to be than Harlem in 1923? But at the same time, I think, she rightly sees that there is a lot more space for queer life in New York at this time in the arts communities than she's really going to find under the thumb of her mother and her family in Boston. So she, in many ways, is kind of parallel to Lena, and they're both looking for an escape from the place that they came from, and they're using this rum running as kind of a way to finance the escape, to launch the escape. But the things that they're kind of running from do not really let go of them as easily as I think either of them hopes. So, yeah.
Now, how did you discover in your research that Harlem was a very, very tolerant place in those days? And it was kind of a place where it was safe to go and be yourself. And of course, musicians are tend to be more tolerant and more live and let live. And, artists, right, in general, tend to be that way. But how did you discover this Harlem Renaissance that you reference in your notes, and what that community was like?
I think just over the course of many years, having read Harlem Renaissance writers, poets, and learning about many of them who were queer themselves, and it's just kind of known. Harlem was, we'll say, it was more tolerant in some spaces. It was sort of like the way that Paris at the time was a little bit of a haven for both Black and queer life in like the 1920s, 30s, and 40s. So it was just one of these places where, because it's an artistic community and people don't have necessarily the same attachment to the same sort of conservative social mores stories that are driving the rest of society. The artistic communities are always a little bit ahead of where everybody else is, kind of social progress wise, and it was very much the same during these periods. So as you learn more about jazz musicians and singers and pianists, you will find in their biographies, many of them, oh yeah, she always traveled with another woman, and maybe it was her roommate, wink wink, but maybe maybe something else. And being able to kind of take that and infuse that into the story felt like it was a really authentic vision of what someone in that period might have looked like.
Yeah. And they have a very complicated relationship, Lena and Dee. I don't want to spoil anything because it's really fun to read. But it gets a little hairy there. We'll just say that. They have a little falling out. They got to work some stuff out. Some family drama. So we got all this mystery about the ship. We got the family drama within the immediate family. Then you got the drama with the other family as they come together. You've got some gangsters.
Yeah, a few.
With, because, where there's crime, there's,
and
rum running and liquor sales, they were a crime. So you've got the whole on the ocean and the ships and the, going out under the fog, covering you to find the other. I mean, that's all dangerous stuff. And then who's out there? Who are you going to encounter? That's
other criminals.
Then you got Dee and her sexuality and her mother's piece of work and her dreams. And I mean, could you put some more in this story, please?
I know. I threw everything but the kitchen sink in there. It's a very full story, I will say.
It all works. It's so beautifully told and it's just seamless, but as I'm going along and I'm reading, I'm thinking, wow, there's a lot of layers to this story. But they all come together. It's fabulous.
Thank you.
So I'm going to hold it up again. I want everybody to go out and get it. It's just hot off the press.
Yes.
And just like I said, that cover is stunning. And that cover really, I think, is very evocative of the story. You got the lighthouse, the shore, the boat out there. I mean, it just really, if I was walking down the aisle at Barnes & Noble, I'd pick that up.
Yeah, it's very
I'd want to know what that was all about,
Yeah.
Fabulous. So I hope it's a bestseller. It's because it deserves to be. So tell me, what else are you working on? Do you have something coming out later, like next year, maybe?
No, not next year. I'm still very early stages of drafting, but I hope will be my third book, but we'll see. And that is based in New York, and it's about Seneca Village, which is this free Black village that was raised to create Central Park in the 1860s. So it's kind of resurrecting that story and building a little bit of mystery around that as well. So we'll kind of see how it shakes out. Very early days, so we'll see what happens with it. But that's kind of where my research has me focused at the moment.
Okay, so you're in the research stage.
Yeah.
Okay. Now this runner is with Ballantine. I guess I think they're both Ballantine, right?
They're both Ballantine. Yeah.
Yeah. So do you have a continuing contract then with them for another book, or will that be a new approach?
It's up in the air right now. I haven't even drafted. Yeah, it's all kind of undecided because the draft does not even exist at this point.
So early days. And in the meantime, you're doing your journalistic pursuits and trying to keep up with the crazy news site. Because I turn on the news and my head explodes every day. It's like,
oh my gosh, it's so much. It's so much.
I can't even imagine being a journalist now.
It's a lot. It's like I'm drinking from a fire hose most days, but yeah.
There's always another AI story. Today there was another one.
Yes. Was it some publishers who bid on a book that was written by AI? Oh my gosh.
Well, the one I heard is that another AI went rogue.
Oh no, what did it do?
It was another case of another AI that broke out of the sandbox, they call it. Because there was the one last week where they found out it had broken out, started hacking the other company. This one broke out, started hacking 3 companies. I just saw a fast blurb. So it's very, very scary. So, we need journalists covering this and keeping us
on it, because the robots are going to, who knows, but
maybe it sounds cliche, but we need a free and fair press, people that we can trust. I mean, Walter Cronkite, where are you?
I know.
Turning over in his grave somewhere. But I mean, seriously, because there is so much going on. and we need folks to help us filter out the nonsense. And
Yeah.
so I am very grateful for folks like you that are doing that hard work.
Thank you.
And then writing beautiful books in the meantime as well. So
yes.
It's been wonderful chatting with you. I'm sorry for the little tech snafu at the beginning.
No,
It was totally my fault.
No
but I'll
problem.
figure it out.
Well, we got it figured out. So it all worked out in the end. But no, it's been great chatting with you as well.
Yeah, it's so nice to see you again. And I'll be waiting for your next book.
Yeah.
And in the meantime, everybody,
yes,
you can order it and it will come to your house, or you can go out to your favorite bookstore. They're both available. They're beautiful books. I strongly recommend both of them. For anybody that loves historical fiction, these are both must-read volumes as far as I'm concerned, because there's just so much in there to learn about. And as we know, diversity is our strength. So we need to read about all kinds of different folks from different backgrounds, different experiences. We're all enriched when we do that.
Yes, absolutely. Thanks so much, Janie.
Thank you, Ashton. It's been lovely. Have a great weekend.
You too. Bye.
Bye-bye.